Welcome to Haunted Escapes with Chris and Diane.
This podcast will cover our trips to haunted hotels and locations.
We will go over a brief history of the location, our personal experiences, and even rate some of the ghost tours in that area.
Join us on our haunted escapes. During the American Revolutionary War, a garrison of 400 men at Fort Mifflin held off the British Army so Washington could get to Valley Forge and reach winter quarters. During the Civil War, it became a military prison and held Confederate prisoners of war, civilians, and Union soldiers. Prior to World War I, Fort Mifflin was in a state of disrepair and was a tourist destination. In 1915, the War Department declared Fort Mifflin a National Historical Monument. In April 1917, Major Mark Brooke allocated $8,000 to repair the barracks, hospital, commandant's house, and one magazine, making the fort fit for military operations. In 1918, the fort became part of the Fort Mifflin Naval Ammunition Depot and stored millions of pounds of ammunition. When the war ended, the Navy Depot continued to store ammunition there. In 1929, due to public anxiety, the ammunition was moved and the fort fell into inaction. During World War II, the Army Corps of Engineers made repairs to the buildings, and the fort housed several anti-aircraft guns. In 1954, the government decommissioned the fort, ending 183 years of service. Today, you can visit the fort for tours, ghost hunts, and much more.
Welcome to Haunted Escapes with Chris and Diane. This is episode 6. Today we'll be discussing Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia. We've been to Fort Mifflin a few times. The fort's very large. It's down near the airport in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's an old fort. It saw, as you heard in the intro, read by Diane, it saw action during the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and even during the World Wars, they used it to hold things.
Ammunition.
The ammunition and guns. Today, it's just a tourist thing. You go in there, and I think it's a small fee to go in, and you get to explore the entire fort. You can walk through. They have a shop where you can go to buy things. Inside the fort, you can go to where the troops were, like the barracks. Then you can walk into where the blacksmith is. Then they have the artillery shed you can see. You can see where the commander's housing was. And they have these casemates there. Now, the casemates were originally built to hold ammunition and weaponry. But during the Civil War, they used them to also hold prisoners that the North had gotten from the South. And they shipped them up here to keep them as prisoners until they were released or hung on some occasions. I'm not sure how many casemates there are in the fort, but I know there are at least 9. And we went to a few of them, and we got to go around and we got to explore them. Mm-hmm. And when you pay, you get in there, they just let you go. You can go throughout the whole fort, go wherever you want. You can go into the casemates. You can test for ghosts. You can use your EVPs. If you have a camera, use your cameras. And there's quite a few ghost stories that go along with the fort. And so when we went with my younger brother Ryan, who we actually have here today.
How's it going?
He came down, and we're gonna let him talk about his experience, and then a little later on in the show, we're going to have a person who worked at the fort for quite a few years. He's going to call in, and we will have him explain some of the stories that he heard and if he saw anything. So.
Yep, and he just happens to be my brother.
Yes,
it's going to be pretty exciting here.
It should be pretty good. And so that was my first takes of the fort. It's very large, very pretty. It has the canals are around it, and it's a fort. It looks really neat.
And they keep it well too.
Yes, they do. They do take very good care of it. What did you think of the fort when we saw it, Diane?
Well, I've heard about it for a long time before I went there, because my brother worked there for a couple years. When you go there, it's very open, and You get to visit all of the buildings, and you get to hear the history and everything, and you can walk. It's like the wall, like the upper wall.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what that's called.
I forgot to say. Yeah, like the paramounts, or it's like, it's the walls. So you can walk the walls, and you can look at. They have cannon there, I believe.
And it was pretty cool.
Yeah, they show you where like the cannons were set up to. And
yeah. Oh, and there's a flag. You'll see a flag there that was. They at one time they were going to make that the American flag because at the time of the Revolutionary War, I think the story is they didn't have a flag. And they made that, and they used it, and it looks totally different than the flag that you know now. I think it's got white, red, and blue stripes on it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Diane's brother will be able to give us more info into that when he calls in. But it was very interesting. And they also have reenactments there. You can go there, and they have they'll do drills where sometimes it'll be Confederacy or Union. Then it'll be big on the Revolutionary War. It is very close to the airport, so you do hear planes flying over.
Planes all the time.
Basically all the time, yeah.
But when you go into casemates, you don't hear them too bad. And the casemates there, some of them are very, very large. And then if you watch Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters,
I think it was Ghost Hunters.
they actually went to Fort Mifflin when they first discovered the new casemate. I think it was casemate 9.
I'm pretty sure it's casemate 9.
And that's supposedly haunted by faceless ghost.
Yeah, Ghost Hunters, for their part, they really publicized the fort more than it was.
Yeah,
it had been.
They probably helped get up a lot of visitors.
And now you can do ghost tours there too.
Yeah, I actually want to do that. They have a whole thing during Halloween.
Mm-hmm. I think it's called Sleep with the Ghost.
You get to stay overnight and
it's
investigate.
like $50 a person or something.
Yeah,
and
we should do that one year.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool.
Maybe we can do it this year. And if we do it, maybe we could do like a live thing from there. That'd be neat.
That'd be cool.
But, so, that's pretty much what the fort is. And now we can talk about some of the ghosts. So, some of the ghosts that haunt Fort Mifflin, there's one called The Screaming Ghost of Elizabeth Pratt in Officers Headquarters. Now, she is the wife of one of the officers, and I forget if something happened to her, to one of her children, or to her.
One of her, I think her kids got yellow fever.
Yeah, it was something like that, and they died, and now you can hear her screaming, and it echoes throughout the entire fort, they say.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also Jacob the Blacksmith. He's another spirit who hangs around in their blacksmith shop, which you can actually go in and see. And I think they said that, like, the tools will go missing.
I think so,
Yeah, the caretaker said it. Like, the tools will go missing and they'll reappear way on the other side of the fort, and nobody's touching them. So, then you also have... There's a ghostly tour guide who goes around the powder magazine, and people see her every once in a while, and they'll mistake her as an actual tour guide, and then they disappear. And then you have
a lamplighter at the soldiers' barracks.
Now, lamp-lighters were the ones back in the old days when it was all gas lights. They would have a designated individual who would walk around with like a long, basically like a wick, and it would have something on the end that would give spark or flame, and they would light all the lamps. So this spirit is also seen there. And then they had the last one that I have here says that there's a little girl named Amanda in the artillery shed.
No, I'll have to ask Christopher about these.
Yeah, those ones he's going to probably know a little bit more about now. As far as our personal things that have happened there, we'll start with my brother Ryan, and then we'll do Diane, and then we'll do me. So, all right, Ryan, tell us your the whole thing. Tell them what casemate you were going into.
I really don't remember the casemate number exactly, but I know it was one of them, and I went in there, when you go in there, obviously you want to go investigate, and then I was in there. Did you have
like an EVP recorder and all that stuff with you?
Yeah, I had my phone, I was trying to catch EVPs, and when I was asking, whatever, out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a shadowish figure walk to the one side of the entrance, to the other side, the right side.
So, like, so you have the entrance,
yes,
and the daylight's coming in, it's a shadow that you saw walk from one side to the other.
I did. I saw it to where it was see-through, and I just saw it walk.
That's pretty
And I think it's cool that's crazy with that is there's only one way in and one way out of them. So there's
That's
no
pretty
way anybody could have.
So, like, after you saw the shadow, did you, like, go over to see up close to see if you could still catch it, or?
Well, as soon as I saw it, I did go over and then I took a quick peek around and I didn't see anybody. So
that's pretty interesting. I wonder if that was one of these, one of the spirits we were just talking about.
Possibly.
It might have been.
Possibly.
So with us, we went in. Now it's Diane. You can tell whatever kind of thing that happened to you there.
Well, I didn't see anything. I know we got some strange EVPs. I'm pretty sure that I still have them that I'm going to...
Put them on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You still got it?
We'll post those, yeah. Yeah, I know I still have them on my Google Drive. But it's kind of like Gettysburg when you go there. You have that weird... like cemetery feeling.
Yeah, it does have like a very somber feeling about
Definitely.
it. Yeah,
the air definitely feels a bit different when you're in the fort.
Maybe not quite as much as like Gettysburg or one of the other big battlefields, but it definitely does have a feeling.
Certain kind.
And I know the casemates, there's no lighting in them.
No.
Some of them are like pitch black, and they're very.
I think they did
creepy.
put lighting in.
Well, I think the one big one they did, but. I know the first one you and me went into.
All I know is the one I went in, it didn't have any light. I used my flashlight, and that was
yeah. Okay. The big one, I remember, the big one has like the string lights.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like, if they do have lights, it's very dimly lit. They're not like bright, you can't really see a lot. But I'm pretty sure most of them, it's just dark.
Yeah.
So, did you have any kind of weird thing that you felt?
Just like weird feelings. Like I know down in the casemate that they recently uncovered with the one with William Howe is like a weird feeling like you're being watched.
William Howe is supposedly the spirit that haunts Casemate 9. William Howe was a Union soldier who got dysentery. His medical tent was burnt in battle, and he left to go to Washington to seek medical attention. The doctor sent him home for 2 months of rest. His enrolling officer and 2 other soldiers showed up at his house at midnight drunk to get him. He fired 2 shots out of his bedroom window to scare them off. Just so happened those 2 shots ended hitting his officer, fatally wounding him. Howe was then sent to Eastern State Penitentiary during his trial, which he was sentenced to death. He was granted a stay of execution and wrote to Abraham Lincoln for mercy, but he did not receive it. He was sentenced to death by hanging. Before he was executed, he made a statement to the crowd. He said, "I never sought the life of the man I killed. I never wished it, and I feel God will pardon me for taking it as I did. I know my fellow soldiers and officers in the Army never blamed my leaving, as I was an invalid and had no hospital to go to in my regiment." A bag was then placed over his head, which was the custom at the time, and he was hung. This is why he is known as the Faceless Man and is seen around the fort.
It's a sad story.
Yeah, it really
That's a stroke
is.
of bad luck.
Yeah, I know. That's really messed up. He did nothing really wrong.
Yeah, he just shot out his bedroom window and it just happened to hit his officer.
Yeah, and they shouldn't even have really been there and bothering him. If the doctor gave him a leave,
Yeah.
you would have thought that the Army wouldn't have held it against him. Like he says, there was no hospital in his regiment. He had nowhere else to go. Washington was close.
It's the only place he could go to.
He went to Washington. But I guess they see it as he still went AWOL because when they came looking, he was missing.
Yeah.
It's a shame. But yeah, I guess that's the way it goes. But yeah, so I think he's like the main ghost they talk about there. It's a sad story. But then again, most of these ghost stories are sad, and that's why they're ghosts, because they have a tragic death that isn't really
justified.
Yeah, it's not.
Like
it's
that.
not justified, and then or it's a shock, and they don't know what's happening, and the spirits are said to stay. I mean, like the officer's wife, even her, grief got her, and I believe the story is she killed herself.
Yeah, she committed suicide.
I think she hung herself from the banister or something.
In front of the officers' quarters, I think.
Yeah, your brother will know more about that.
And that's where, like, apparently you'll hear the screams coming from.
Yeah, and like I heard, and they've like had fire engines go there from the screaming. It's been reported.
Oh yeah.
So many times. Yeah, I remember when they said that.
Yeah, they've had fire engines go, and they've checked
the police.
Yeah, the police have shown up, and the police have like actually heard the screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine that? You get called thinking that there's something going on. You go down there, bust on in there, and hear you're still hearing the screaming, but there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's
nobody
crazy.
is there, and you're like looking at where the scream is coming from, but nothing's there. I don't know how you would react to that.
You'd be speechless.
Yeah,
I mean, what else can you say?
I guess you would. You would definitely probably become a believer after seeing that. Yeah, so that's quite the story. And now I'm at my story when we were there. I was me and Diane had gone into, it's like a water room where they had a pump room, and we went into there. It's pretty close, I think, to the entrance. And we went in there, and it's pitch black in there. The doors are like heavy iron, and they shut behind you. Mm-hmm. And it was just us, from what I remember. And we went in there, and we're standing in there, and we decided we're going to try EVPs. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting there, and we're asking questions. And like as we're standing there waiting, I keep getting the feeling that there was somebody in the building with us, and
that's crazy.
And then I like heard what sounded like whispering coming from like the one corner, and I went over and I like kept looking, thought that I heard something, and then I would hear it like on the other side. So it was like back and forth.
Like a man's voice.
Yeah, and that would like I would hear it on the left side,
mm-hmm.
and then when I went to check the left, I would hear it on the right side, and you go check the right, and so it was like it was messing with me.
That's crazy.
And then it got where, and I didn't know who it was. It's pitch black in there, so we were like, you know what? We had to, I think, feel the wall to get our way out. So I started getting a little weirded out because I didn't know if it was a ghost or if it was a person who was messing with me. I mean, who knows?
Mm-hmm. So
that kind of got me a little freaked out. So we wound up leaving and went back out to the main fort and started looking around at the other stuff. But yeah, that was one of the weird things that happened to me when I was there. But that's pretty much all that happened to me. And like I said, it's a great place. If you're in Philadelphia,
mm-hmm.
you should look into trying to
go
there.
To see it because it's filled rich of history. And
no, I mean, just the fact
that learning about it is awesome.
Just the fact that the fort held the British at bay so that Washington could get the Valley Forge.
Yeah.
If he hadn't gotten the Valley Forge, they never would have been able to actually like become an army. He never would have been able to cross, and who knows what could have happened. So it's an instrumental place.
Yeah.
So
and like everybody knows Valley Forge. Valley Forge is like one of the big tourist destinations in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
As well as Washington's Crossing.
Yeah, nobody really knows about little Fort Mifflin that played a
massive role in that.
Yeah. So if you're ever in Philadelphia, which, I mean, you can't beat the city for history if you're into the Revolutionary War and you want to learn about how the country was founded. You come here, you can go down Center City. There are so many things. You have Independence Hall, you have Carpenter's Hall, you have the Independence Center, you have the Liberty Bell, Betsy Ross House, Franklin. Alfred's Alley, Franklin Court. There's so many things that are historically Penn's Landing.
Yeah.
And that's not even Revolutionary War. That's just Penn's Landing. It's great down there. But there's so much to do in Philadelphia Center City area. I would definitely recommend people come visit it. I mean, I've lived here my whole life, and we would go down there on weekends. Family trips. You go down there and you would experience
you always learn something new too.
Yeah, there's always new things that you can learn, and you can tour the Betsy Ross house. And I think it's Franklin Court where they have the telephones where you can talk to the different presidents.
Oh, I remember that.
If you have kids, that's really
I don't know
cool.
if that's there anymore.
I don't know. It used to be. I haven't been there in a while,
but
it used to be. You'd have to see if it still is. But there's a lot to do down there, and there's all kinds of restaurants down there. And I want to do a whole episode on Center City because there is a whole lot of things down there. And there's some really good haunted ghost tours. One is called Spirits of 76. Very good. It meets at Siner's Garden. It's a really good one if you're ever in the area. And I think they have walks at like 7 o'clock at night. It starts. It's definitely something neat because it'll take you all around. You'll hear all kinds of stories about Washington Square and all that. So there's a lot of history, a lot of ghost stuff too in the city. And obviously,
Absolutely.
if you're here and you come for a tour like that, you can experience a lot of neat stuff. There's a lot of places to really check out. And I call me biased because I've lived here my whole life, but it's definitely worth it. And once you're here, you also have Valley Forge, which is real close, and of course Fort Mifflin. So you can go down to Fort Mifflin. You can see what we're talking about.
Experience it for yourself.
There are ghost tours down there. You can go in there and just wander on your own. And I think they also have guided tours that you can, like, pay somebody, obviously, and they'll take you for a guided tour. But it's definitely something that would be worth checking out. And if anybody has a chance to, I mean, you should come try it out. Come check it out. There's tons of restaurants and stuff down Center City, so it's not like they don't have a lot to keep you entertained.
There's a whole bunch of stuff down there.
So definitely, I would say, if you got a chance, you're in the area, swing on down to good old Philadelphia and learn about your roots. Not enough people know about our founding of our country. We should pass it on as much as we can.
And I would just like to add that Fort Mifflin is open from March until December. I would recommend going in like the springtime or the summer because it is wide open and it does get a little chilly-ish right on the water.
It's right
the
off
water's
the water,
right
and
there.
it's very it gets very cold there.
Yeah, it'll get cold. So, all right. So next we'll be interviewing Christopher Damiani, and we're going to ask him about some of the things we talked about, and we'll hear if he experienced anything or if he knows anyone who experienced anything. And obviously, he works for the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, so he knows a lot more about the history of the place than me. So we'll ask him some questions about that, and then we'll be able to get you guys to know more about it than what we just told you. So stay tuned. So we have Christopher Damiani here. It's Diane's brother. He was working at the fort for quite a few years, I believe. And he has some stories that he knows, that he's experienced, and that he's heard about some of the things we told you guys. So we're going to ask him some things, and we're going to let him explain the stuff that he's experienced. So first question, how'd you get the job?
Well, I'm a history major, and so after college, started looking for jobs in the history field, and it was as easy as, not easy, but as simple as, they happened to be looking for tour guides and educators, and, I applied there, went and interviewed, and I started working there in 2005, I believe, and I worked there full and part-time for about 6 or 7 years.
Oh wow! So you were there for quite a while. That's pretty cool. So you probably have heard a lot of the stories and everything.
Oh yeah. I'll say, a lot of interesting and weird things happen there.
So did you know that it was haunted before you started working there?
No. I to be honest, I hadn't been there before. I even went for the interview. I knew of the place, but I had never actually been there. And so the first time when I went for my interview was the first time I actually had been there. And so I didn't really know any of the haunted stories behind any of it.
So like, how long did you work there before you really started hearing about them?
Well, I heard the stories pretty early on because one of my coworkers, Wayne Irby, was the full-time caretaker there. And so he lived on at the fort itself. He lived in the second floor of the officers' barracks. They set up an apartment for him.
Oh wow!
So pretty early on, I heard some of the stories, and when I started, they were already doing some of the ghost tour type things. So I heard them pretty early on, some of them.
So that's really cool. So what were your duties there? What did you do while you were there?
Well, technically I was a tour guide and educator, but really, because the place is so big and the staff is so small, it's one of those, and it's a nonprofit, so it's one of those places where you do a little bit of everything. But so from helping Wayne with landscaping to to help in Lorraine in the office sell tickets and things like that. You did a little bit of everything, but my main jobs there were the education program for school groups and things like that, and doing tours and things like that when we didn't have school groups. And
so you were pretty much jack of all trades. You had to kind of know a little bit of everything.
Right, yep.
And then you do participate in some of the reenactments.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did the whole, when we did tours and things, we would be in uniform. And then we would have reenactment groups and other groups come in, and sometimes we would be involved with that, but a lot of times we would be in uniform because we were doing our own programs, even though the reenactment was there.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So now we're going to, what were some of your stories that happened while you were there?
Well, I guess there's quite a few, but I don't want to take up all the time. But one of the ones that I still can't explain to this day is when we would, and it happens at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a July. In July, so it was bright out, it was light out.
So you can't say, it was the shadows that made you see this. This was something that it was clear as day.
This was something odd that was, and it was daytime. It wasn't, I know nighttime things tend to happen at night, and it's spookier and it sets the atmosphere, but this one happened in the daytime.
Well, they say if a place is haunted, it's haunted all day and night, not just at nighttime.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah,
it's very true.
So basically, at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, we would close up. And if you've ever been to the fort, or if you ever take a look at the fort, you have the fort proper with the buildings inside the fort, and then there's a causeway to go over to the hospital building, which is where the office is, to the parking lot for your cars and things like that.
Okay, yeah, I do remember when we were there.
Yeah, and so, but before you do that, you go around, and basically, you go around and make sure the buildings are all locked up in the fort before you go over to the office. So I was there by myself, and I closed up all the buildings, and I was getting ready to walk across the causeway, leave the fort and walk across the causeway to go to the office to check out and everything. And I heard what sounded like a door coming from where the officers' barracks is, a door opening or closing. I couldn't really tell.
The one you just locked?
Yeah, the one I just locked.
And you were the only one in the fort at the time, right?
Yeah, I was the only one in there at the time. And so I happened to look, and where the causeway is to where the officers' quarters is maybe 150 feet, and it's not that far. And the building is kind of parallel. It's not perpendicular, so it's along the perimeter. And I happened to see, I looked up towards the officers' quarters, and I saw what looked like a figure from a head and a kind of shoulders walk behind the building, to the side of the building.
Dude, that's awesome.
That's cool.
And and I looked and I'm like, what could that be? And over there is, and it looked like it was a person in white. And there was, I should preface this is that one of the stories is people see a woman in white.
Okay.
Around the officers' quarters in that vicinity.
Is that Elizabeth Pratt who they talk about, possibly?
It's it sometimes they will say that it's Elizabeth Pratt. Other times people say no, it's not her. They don't know who she is. But
I got you.
But she has been attributed. The woman in white has sometimes been referred to as Elizabeth Pratt. Elizabeth Pratt was one of the wives of one of the officers that stayed there in the 19th century. But anyway, I paused for a minute, and I'm like, maybe somebody's still in here that I didn't know about. And I went over to look back where I saw somebody walk behind. Now, there is a door over there that's painted white, that sometimes opens up. It's just kind of this small door that hides like where they have some of the electrical equipment, like the circuit breaker and all that. I thought, well, maybe that just blew open, and that's when I saw the door close or the door moving and open. But when I got over there was a big rock in front of the door.
And wasn't that then?
It was not the door. I walked all around the building, didn't find anyone. I walked all around the fort again. I didn't find anyone. And so I chalked it up to one of those unexplained things that happened there. Went back and told the office manager, and she said, you saw the woman in white. She took it in stride. Lorraine Irby was the office manager at the time, and she had been there a long time. She's since retired along with Wayne, but she heard a lot of stories, and she said, "Oh yeah," she said, she's around, and that was about it. But it's one that I never had. It only happened once, and I never had that experience again. But it's something I can't explain.
That's cool. It's like you just tell somebody, "Oh yeah, I just saw this," and they're just like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it." We'll see her once in a while, So what? Any other ones you want to talk about?
One of the other weird stories that happened also involved Lorraine and I. It was in the wintertime, and in the wintertime, the fort's not as busy because there's not as much traffic, so you're not working as many hours and things like that. And I had stopped there. I wasn't scheduled to work that day. I had stopped there to talk to her and then to get something. I can't remember exactly why I was there that day. Well, I was in the office, which is the hospital building, and the main office is on the second floor of the hospital building. And there's really only one way. If you picture the hospital building, it's a two-story building, and there's one way. You go up to the second floor on the outside. There's a porch and a balcony, and you go in to the building from the balcony. So there's one way in and one way out. And as soon as you walk in, that's where her office was. And I'm standing there with my back to the door. And we're just talking, and I'm leaning against, there's a filing cabinet, and I'm leaning against the filing cabinet. And as we're talking, I felt 3 taps on my shoulder, just like somebody tapping me on the shoulder 3 times, kind of really lightly. And I didn't think anything of it, and we're still talking. And then maybe half a minute or a minute goes by, and I feel 3 more taps, but this time it's a little harder. And I kind of glanced behind me, and I thought maybe Wayne or somebody was there, and nobody was there, but kept talking. And then maybe half a minute later, 3 more taps, but this time I was really deliberate. Just felt just like somebody tapping me 3 times on the shoulder.
That's crazy.
I turn around, and nobody's there. And Lorraine says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Somebody's tapped me 3 times in the past couple minutes. 3 times each time." And she said, "Nobody's come in."
Oh no.
That's crazy.
That's awesome.
They just want to say hi. They know you're back.
Yeah, right. Something wanted your attention.
Wanted the attention.
Yeah. So I told them, "Hey, I'm back. We'll go in and,
maybe it was that lady you saw.
yeah." But yeah, that was another time that I could not explain it. It did not feel, I didn't feel like it was spooky afterward, but it didn't feel anything was weird other than there was nobody there.
That's weird enough for me.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So that was another experience we had, and I guess I've had a number of other ones, but one other story I wanted to share was we were doing me and a friend of mine were working an overnight. So at this point, they were doing these what we called sleep with the ghosts, where people would come in and sleep overnight, and and they investigate with ghost hunting equipment and things like that, and naturally staff would be there just to make sure nobody's doing anything crazy, but so we weren't sleeping. But and we went down into one of the casemates, me and my friend, and we were just sitting there, and all of a sudden you heard notes, music notes.
Oh, wow.
Somebody playing like a guitar or a mandolin, kind of floating down the hallway.
Huh.
That's cool.
Nobody had any musical instruments. It wasn't a cell phone or anything like that. In fact, cell phones don't work down in the casemates. But we heard very clear music coming from the casemates, and and talk. And then afterward, and we both verified it independently. I said, "Did you hear something?" And he said, "Yeah." And then they said, "Well, what did you hear?" And he told me, and I said, I heard the same thing. But we went and talked to Wayne afterward, and Wayne said, "Well, it makes sense because he's a mandolin music has been heard down there, and they had political prisoners in some of the other casemates, and they would be given things like they would be afforded the luxuries to have musical instruments and things to pass the time. So it wouldn't be unusual for that to hear something like that." So,
That's cool.
That's
pretty
weird.
cool.
That's really cool.
yeah.
Now, they used the casemates as, like, holding cells, didn't they?
Yeah. They so the casemates. So just to give a little bit of the history of the place. The fort is originally built in 1775 by the British. It's finished by the Americans because in 1775, obviously, the war is breaking out. The fort. They started building the fort years before that, and by 1775, the fort is somewhat you could call complete. It looks very different than it does today. And then the fort goes through the war, the Revolutionary War. It's the site of the largest bombardment of the Revolutionary War. And ultimately, the British take the fort. They start rebuilding the fort when the British move into Philadelphia in 1778. The British start rebuilding the fort. So the oldest building that's in the fort now is British built. It's the blacksmith shop built in 1777.
Okay.
Ultimately, the British leave Philadelphia in 1778. The Americans back into the city. The Americans retake the fort. After the Revolutionary War, the fort is rebuilt. So the fort, if you go there today, the fort that you see is the rebuilt Fort Mifflin from 1795 home.
Oh, okay.
The blacksmith shop. And the casemates, originally, the casemates date to 1795.
Okay.
Because...
So after it was rebuilt.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I said, so the casemates come after the fort was rebuilt?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the casemates date back to 1795 when it was rebuilt. The fort, during the bombardment, during the Revolutionary War, the fort is essentially destroyed. There's still a few things that are left standing, but it's essentially destroyed. And then, so the casemates are date back to 1795 after the fort's rebuilt. And they originally were built for storage, storing supplies, sometimes storing munitions. But if you go into the casemates, they're arched for strength. The walls are 12 feet thick, with a 25 feet of dirt piled on top of it. They're really built for strength and for storage. Yeah. But to answer your question, so during the Civil War, Fort Mifflin is a prisoner of war camp, and they did keep prisoners down in the casemates. The casemates, they're creepy looking. They look like a dungeon. If you go down there, but they were meant to be kept cool and dry. Is what the original intention was. Yeah,
especially if you're storing gunpowder, you can't let that get wet, then it won't fire.
Right, exactly, yeah. So, but yeah, there were there are 5 casemates that are in the main part of the fort, and during the Civil War, casemate 1 is where Confederate prisoners were kept. Casemates 2, 3, and 4 were solitary confinement, usually kept for political prisoners. And casemate 5 is where they kept the criminals or the people they considered criminal, which could be deserters and things like that. Union deserters and people like that were kept in casemate 5.
So casemate 5, not 9. 5 is the one that this William Howe was said to be in.
Right, and that so William Howe's an interesting story. Yeah, he was said to be kept in casemate 5. All the information we had on him, they didn't specify that he was in casemate 5, but the things talked about it would make sense to keep him there because he was a Union deserter. And the descriptions and things that he gave were other people talked about. All of us always thought he was kept in casemate 5.
Okay.
Now I don't know if you want me to go into it, but there's this kind of leads to the other casemate that we found later on, because his story ties into that.
Oh, I didn't know that there was another one found, unless that was the one that was on, I think Ghost Hunters did a show there?
Yeah. Ghost Hunters came in and did a show, gosh, I don't remember how many years ago, but they did, that's casemate 11.
11?
Casemate 11.
Okay.
Yeah, and and that's the one that William Howe is associated with. We know he was kept down there.
That's the one where there's like the plexiglass and it has like the name that was carved in it or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Casemate 11 was found. We actually, so when I said that the fort during the Revolutionary War was all but destroyed, we're now discovering that it seems that there were parts of the fort that did survive the battle, and casemate 11 seems to be one of them. So again, not to go too far into it, but after at least with Fort Mifflin and with a lot of government facilities, when the government doesn't need something, rather than knocking it down, they just kind of build on top of it. And so casemate 11 ended up getting bricked up, and then built the torpedo magazine, which is now the torpedo magazine at the fort. They just kind of built that on top of casemate 11. So casemate 11 was kind of closed up and left almost like a time capsule.
That's cool.
Wow.
That's cool.
And our Wayne, the caretaker, one day was cutting the grass. We always knew something was down near the torpedo magazine, because if you walked along the top of the wall, you would see the chimney for the torpedo magazine, and then there was another chimney cap.
Oh, okay.
And so we knew something was there. We had no idea what it was. We actually could not get permission to do an excavation. We didn't have the fort didn't have the money to put into it to do the excavation, and they were trying to get grants and things, but nothing had worked out at that point. So it just sat there for a while, and a couple times, we tried to lower a camera down on a rope and different things just to see if we could see anything, and we never really could. But one day Wayne was cutting the grass and just happened to have a sinkhole opened up.
Wow.
And ultimately got permission to dig it up, and they found buried underneath the torpedo magazine is casemate 11. It was a whole casemate 11 consists of 2 rooms, and I don't know for sure if they ever confirmed it, but they believe it's to the original construction of the fort, so 1775.
Oh wow.
They do know that during the Civil War, though, it was used to house prisoners, and they know that because when they opened it up, because it had just kind of been bricked up and sealed up, it was almost like a time capsule, like I said. So you went down there, and they had these big wooden doors that looked like they could have been built yesterday. They were in fantastic shape, and there was all this graffiti from prisoners and things. It was 150-year-old graffiti.
Wow, that's crazy.
And one of the things we found down there was William Howe's signature on one of the cell walls.
That's crazy.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. So now, with William Howe, did you, or because it says that his spirit is like he haunts the fort a lot. Did you or anybody you know ever have any kind of thing that you think it could have been him? Anything weird that happened in casemate 11 when you guys went in there that it might have been him?
Nothing to my knowledge, except from, at least me personally, I didn't have anything happen in casemate 11. I know the ghost hunters, I believe, caught some things down there, but I hadn't heard that anything happened. Now, William Howe, before they found casemate 11, and we always thought he was in casemate 5,
Yeah.
he always got blamed for, so one of the stories about casemate 5 is that women with blonde hair, particularly for whatever reason, women with blonde hair would get their hair pulled or messed around with in casemate 5. And because we thought William Howe was there, people always said it was William Howe doing this sort of thing.
Okay.
But, you know, who it is or what it is or what goes on, you know, I don't know if it's William Howe or not, but that's one of the stories that got associated with him that I know, but I don't know that it was him.
Okay. How about the screaming ghost of Elizabeth Pratt in the officers' headquarters? Have you heard anything about her? Because there are stories of, like, sometimes police coming from hearing these screams and all kinds of things.
Yeah, there's a lot of different stories about her. I know nothing. I'd never heard her scream. Wayne told me a story once of he said he hadn't been working there that long at that point, and he had finished weed whacking and cutting the grass and things, and he was walking along the outside the soldiers' barracks.
Yeah.
And he felt somebody push him.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
And he kept, walking, and he felt somebody push him again. And then he said, and he said something. He said, what's going on here, or something like that. And he said a couple minutes later, he heard right next to him, he sounded like a woman screaming.
Oh, geez.
Screaming at him. And, he said it rattled him a little bit, but
I think so.
he said that night, he said he went up to Elizabeth's room, and he said he just talked like he would a normal person, and said, look, I'm going to be working here, and you let me do my job, and I'll let you do your job, and we'll leave each other alone. And he said that was the only time she ever really bothered him.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But you're right. There are other stories that especially before the fort was so the fort basically is in operation up until 1954, and then in 1954 it's eventually shut down, and it's just kind of left to sit there, and it had been abandoned for years until a friends group was formed in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
To start clean up everything and talk about reopening as a museum and a historic site. There are a lot of different stories that people would hear. People would report to the police that they would hear a woman scream from the fort that had been closed up, and police would come out there and they wouldn't find anything.
That's crazy.
That's creepy.
And there's a lot of those type of stories.
That's crazy. And then you were talking about the blacksmith shop. Now, there's stories about a spirit there named Jacob, and it said that he messes with doors and things.
Yeah. So from what we could find, Jacob was one of the blacksmiths at the fort, and he always wanted. So the blacksmith shop at the fort has two doors. It's a small building, and it has a bellows and everything, obviously. But it's a small building, and there's entryway in and out. There's two doors to the fort, and the story is that just as we go around closing all the doors when we close up, staff would go around and close all the doors, and every morning the back door of the blacksmith shop would be open. And the reason for that is Jacob petitioned the fort's commander to have a standing order to always have the back door of the blacksmith shop open, because he said, if you close both of these doors, the soldiers would complain it got too noisy, or the smell, or things like that, and they would want the doors closed.
Yeah.
And the blacksmith basically petitioned to have a standing order to have the back door always open, because he said if not, the fumes and the heat and everything will make them pass out.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know what happened, whether an order was ever issued or not, but the story is that when staff would go around and close up doors for the night, in the morning, the back door of the blacksmith shop was always opened again, and nobody would have done that. So that happened apparently for a couple months until one of the staff members got the idea to nail the door shut.
Oh.
And so they nailed the door shut, and then apparently the next day the door had been torn off its hinges.
Oh, that's crazy.
Wow.
Oh, man. Jacob was a little bit aggravated at you guys.
With that one, yeah.
Yeah. So then they don't, we don't close the back door of the blacksmith shop.
Yeah, I would think not. That's crazy. There's another story about a supposed tour guide at the Powder magazine.
Yeah, there's a story that, there's the Phantom tour guide. He apparently looks very authentic.
I'm sure.
And, no one that I knew of, anyway, had actually seen him. It all comes from stories of people that visit the fort. There would be people would come in, and depending on the day, you sometimes would have guided tours, especially on the weekend. You had staff there to give tours, but during the week, the fort would be open, and depending on the day, you may or may not have a staff member tour guide there. But there were multiple times, just with Lorraine and people before her, where people would come in and she would say, well, it's a self-guided tour. We don't have, somebody to do a tour today. And they would say, okay, and, go walk around and things. And then they would come back a couple hours later and they would always say, look, I know you said you didn't have anybody over there, but the guy you had over there by the Powder magazine who was dressed in uniform, he was really good. And he did a fantastic tour.
Employee of the month.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. And Lorraine would say, have anybody over there? What did he look like? They always would just kind of give a generic description of a person in a Revolutionary War uniform, and he had brown hair. But he really apparently knew what was going on, and so that's the story of the Phantom tour guide. And he's been seen multiple times.
He's so authentic.
Yeah, right.
It's like, that's pretty crazy. The last story that we've heard during our, while we were looking stuff up, they say there's supposedly a little girl named Amanda who haunts the artillery shed.
Yeah, there are, I hadn't heard, I heard the story. I haven't heard any voices or anything, but I know when I was, so the story is that there are little children. Sometimes you'll hear it's a little girl, sometimes you'll hear they're not quite sure whether it's a girl or a boy. She's usually never seen, or they're usually never seen, they're usually just heard in the artillery shed. The nearest we can figure, because it wouldn't, the only way that having kids at the fort would make sense is if they were one of the officers' children.
Okay.
Depending on the time period, an officer could bring his family to live at the fort, and some of them did, and some of them did have children. As far as I know, we were never able to verify that any kids were killed. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Yeah, there's a long history there.
No kids there. But the story is that around the artillery shed, people will hear a little girl calling for her mom, or a little child calling for their mommy.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, one of the Sleep with the Ghosts, we had somebody come up I had somebody come up to me and say that they heard somebody calling for their mommy over there.
That's crazy.
But that I did not experience. But that's the nearest we can figure is it would be a child of one of the officers that would have stayed there.
That's awesome. So now, knowing everything you know about the hauntings and experiencing the things you experienced, would you still have taken that job?
Oh, yeah. It's really a great place, whether you go for the ghost or you go for the history.
Or both.
Or both. It really is it's a fun place. It really is good. Tonight you have to get there and check it out.
All right, Chris. Thank you very much for you coming on and telling us those stories. They're pretty fantastic.
Some pretty cool stories, man.
Yeah, they're really good stories. I appreciate it immensely, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right, we'll thank you again, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
So again, a big thank you to Diane's brother, Christopher Damiani. That was great. They were some fantastic stories. I couldn't have asked for anything better. We weren't sure what he was going to bring, but that was great. And so again, thank you to him for coming on and talking and taking the time out of his day to give us all that insight. So this one is probably our longest one. Yeah, we're clocking at a little over an hour now. Mm-hmm. We're probably going to post this thing full as is because those stories are just too good to...
you definitely can't not listen to the whole stories and get you so pumped up to come visit Fort Mifflin. Like, that's for sure.
Absolutely. They're just too good to cut them. So... if you like what you hear here, let us know. Please, if you can, follow us on Spotify or whatever you listen to. It'll really help get our channel and our podcast out there. We get it out there, we'll be able to get more people on, and we'll be able to get into more details with things that are going on. And Chris says he had a bunch of other stories about it, so maybe one of these days we'll do like one of those ghost night things, and we can see if he can.
We'll do another episode.
Yeah, we'll do another episode with him, so you guys can hear a little bit more about it, because that was pretty.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was.
It really was awesome.
So again, thank you, and I also want to thank my brother Ryan for coming down here and hanging out with us today and telling us his story. So that's everything for. You're welcome. So that's everything for today's episode. Mm-hmm. Next week, I'm thinking about doing. We did a Yorktown, so we may do Yorktown. Stay on the whole Revolutionary War kick.
Okay.
So if you enjoyed this, like I said, please subscribe, like us. We'll have a video on Friday, like we've been doing, that should have some photos of the fort. I'm
gonna post those EVPs too that we got there. Yeah. I'm not sure if we found anything, but I'll post them and see if you listened to it and see if you could hear anything that we didn't.
Yeah, and if you have any stories of places that you've been to and experience that have happened, or even if you just want to tell us about your regular normal things at your house, just send them to our email address at panepicproductions@gmail.com. And just let us know, and then we'll do another podcast, and we'll read some of your stories and tell people who you are and get your stuff out there. So thank you everybody for listening, and again, big thanks to my brother for coming down and Diane's brother for giving us that awesome interview.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for coming with us on yet another Haunted Escape, and we will see you guys next week.
Yes, thank you. We are available wherever you listen to podcasts, and thank you. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.